I would like to do that. Yeah, I'd like to go.
Go over to the farm.
Okay,
Get ready to come over here.
okay,
We can just go out the back here.
okay. Put this. Good afternoon. I am thankful for your presence here, as certainly the family is grateful for your presence here today. My name is Reverend Ed Brock, and it is my privilege to help honor the life of Mr. Connor. In a few moments, I'll be asking two members of the family to come forward and to make some comments. And there might be those among us in addition who would like to say a word about him. But before I do call upon a family member to come forward, I'd like to note that Mr. Connor was a deeply loved person by those who knew him and were close to him, and recognized as a kind and gentle and deeply sweet man. And a higher praise of a person can hardly be found than to say those things about someone. It was said of Mr. Connor that he had a childlike innocence about him most of his life, and that was part of his charm to others. He experienced challenges in life like all of us do, and all of our members of our family do. He managed to manage and take in stride many of the challenges and all the challenges really that came his way. And by the last 10 or 15 years of his life, his deep belly laugh was something that was remembered by a lot who knew him. I'd like to share with you a well-known and well-beloved reading from the Bible, the 23rd Psalm. As we gather here and we are shaken by our fears and shaken by the loss of a loved one, it is important to remind ourselves what we are grounded in. Reading comes from Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. At this time, I would like to ask Jennifer, the niece of Mr. Connor, to come forward to speak.
Good afternoon, friends and family of Brack. Thank you all for being here today. We come together to not only mourn the loss of Brack's life, but to also celebrate the joy of his life and the ways in which his life touched our own. I stand here before you not only as a niece of Brack's, but as the daughter of Mitchell and Carol Connor, Brack's brother and sister-in-law. On behalf of Carol, I would like to share with you her heartfelt words about Brack and his family. Over 50 years ago, Carol met the Connor family, including Brack, at the children's home in Winston-Salem. While there, Brack interacted with his peers, played sports, and graduated from Reynolds High School. Brack was a good kid who never got into trouble. He is remembered fondly, as evidenced by the comments of his passing on the Children's Home Alumni Facebook page. Carol is amazed at the Connor family, Brack's family, in the ways that they love, care, and support one another. The Connors rally around each other, not only in the sad times, such as this, but also in the good times to celebrate each other. Brack may have died alone, but one thing is for sure. He knew he was cared about and loved. Kevin, Cheryl, Doris, and Brenda were always there for him and made sure he had whatever he needed. There is a beautiful hymn that we sing in the Lutheran Church. It starts with, "I was there to hear your morning cry." It ends with, "When the evening gently closes in and you shut your weary eyes, I'll be there with you as I have always been, with just one more surprise." So you see, Brack was not alone after all. God was right there with him. Brack is now in a heavenly place, free from pain, sickness, and worry. So today, as we celebrate Brack's life, let us feel the peace and comfort of knowing that he is loved as God would have it. Let the life that Brack lived, kind and gentle, influence us in our own daily lives. Let us leave this place today with his family as a shining example of what true Christian love is, and treat each other accordingly as long as we all shall live. And remember, even in this time of sadness, to hold your head up high so that the Lord's face may shine upon you.
Jennifer, thank you for those very beautiful words and very comforting to us all. And I'd like to call upon Kevin to speak next.
I feel like my dad. These are his glasses, and so I recently can't see as well. I'd like to reiterate and thank each and every one of you for coming here. It blesses my heart. It's something that I'll never forget, and I know my sister won't either, and our kids and our families. I'd like to start with my dad, Braxton Connor. Many in the family, we lovingly call them, know him as Bang, and still call him Bang today. I'd like to start with Braxton Connor, the earthly man that we knew here. Such as what did, on the outside, his daily life, what did he like, and how did we get to know him? What did he enjoy doing? His hobbies and such. My dad, he really loved fishing. I remember my mom complaining about the honeymoon that all he did was fish, and all they did is stay on the pier. It was a loving complaint. She enjoyed it too, but he loves all kinds of fishing, and recently he was able to come to Florida, and I'm not sure if that picture made it in there, but we went out on the boat, and he fished off the boat, and we have a dock, and he just liked going out there. Even by himself, we would get him the bait and the rod and reel, Cat and I, and wheel him down there, and he just had a great time. My dad, he loved sports, really made up a large part of his life, playing sports when he was able to and younger, and then especially baseball or football, and then later in life, I have a love of baseball cards still today that has come back up in the last 6 months. I'm like, it's just driving my brain crazy. Where does this come from? Why? And I figured it out pretty quick when I was buying some cards recently. Every card I would take a picture and send it to my dad, and we'd talk about it. And so we had this bond through baseball. We had watched, and my sister too, collecting baseball cards. And so he had a love of sports. And then what else? He loved to take care of his plants. He had really grown into someone, quite the gardener. And so that's why you saw a bunch of his plants. Those are pictures he would send me. He was so proud. And last year, there's a really nice picture in there of tulips. So he had a nice tulip harvest. And this year, he called me about 10 days ago and said he was going to try hydrangeas this year. And so we were really excited about that. But he said, Kevin, he loved eBay too. So he said, I want to get those hydrangeas, but they're one too much. They're $10 for bulbs. And so I said, all right. So I hung up and I ordered them for him, and I always enjoyed doing that. And I said, Dad, it's going to get here, and you can do your plants. And just ironically, those did come in 2 days ago, and so we're going to do a little commemorative garden of hydrangeas. Let's see here. My dad, he loved eating seafood. He loved seafood and talking about it, but he was a picky eater. My son said, I always loved when Grandpa was eating with us because I wasn't the only picky eater at the table. And he would eat, he really loved fresh shrimp and boiled peanuts, as Chris knows, just as long as they were cooked the exact right way. Most of all, though, I believe my dad really just loved spending time with his family. Just anybody that he cared about and that cared about him, he loved no matter what, just being in your presence. My dad was blessed, like so many aren't, in that he knew the full meaning of what family was. He and his brothers and sisters went through so many hardships early in life, but it was these exact challenges that led to them to have such an unbreakable bond. This is a type of family bond that is rare to see today. He would tell me story after story about them growing up together. Most recently, Dad had talked about Sonny and how he was an expert pool shark. Recently, we were at an antique shop together, and I lost track of him for a few minutes. When I found him, he was standing with a store clerk, and he was telling memories of Sonny, some of Sonny's pool adventures. And this sweet lady, she let him talk for about 5 minutes, and then when my dad was done, she grabbed his arm and said, "Thank you for sharing that story with me." Dad was telling these stories about Sonny because he loved him, and he missed him. And these memories were a beautiful connection to Sonny that were his, my dad's, to keep forever. They were a gift and a very clear sign that Sonny's spirit was still with my dad. And now, each of us here today have these same kinds of memories with my dad. Loving stories and wonderful memories, all of them a gift and a reminder to us from my dad that his spirit will remain with us until we see him again. Some stories my dad loved to tell, just a few. He told numerous stories about growing up with his brothers and sisters in the children's home and the unique hardships that they faced there, and then how that made them better and stronger and closer together. As I mentioned, sports were a huge part of my dad's life. He had played football in high school along with some of his brothers. Incidentally, he then enjoyed following Wake Forest football. He just missed by a day or two seeing Wake Forest have the best season since 2007. But weekly, I would get at least 2 or 3 updates, phone calls or messages about Wake Forest progress through the season. Because Dad had played football for R.J. Reynolds, and I believe they played some of the games in the stadium, Wake Forest Stadium, he said. But Dad loved to tell me a particular story. I won't get it right, but I've heard it so many times. It was about how I think my dad was on defense, and offense had the ball. He'd always say, back then you played both offense and defense. And so they were just running the full time, and I guess this receiver caught the ball, and my dad just leveled him and tackled him and then just kept on running. And he ran back around, and he heard one of the referees telling another referee or telling another player, like, that number 42, he's really came to play football today. So I heard that story numerous times, and I'll never forget it. Dad loved to tell stories about his grandkids, too. He was physically present at the birth of all 3 of his grandchildren. And he mourned and grieved deeply with my sister at the early tragic passing of his third child, Avaya. Dad loved so deeply. I'm not the best at remembering things, so it always made me so happy when my dad would start to tell stories that cracked him up about Holden when Holden was younger. And he would do the same thing to Holden and I, telling stories about Ayla. Again, a reminder that these are gifts that Dad's given us and stay with us. And now we all each have our unique and beautiful stories to remember my dad by. One last story. The coin hunting. So we'd gotten into, growing up, I would always find these little coin flips. And so my dad, he was into collecting things. And side note, I told him here recently several times, he's got to have the best antique car collection in this county. But so I kind of grew to have this interest in coins because of my dad. And so recently it was intentional. I wanted some more things to share with my dad. And so we kind of picked that back up together. And one of the most precious memories that I'll always treasure now is just in the last few months, we would go to the bank and special order $500 in halves and Kennedy halves, and we would go through these. And Dad really enjoyed this. He would turn it to the side and look for silver in there, and it was a treasure hunt thing. And it wasn't about the value; it was about there's something deep inside a lot of us that just like to find treasure. And so usually what we found and then we turn it back in, get another $500 box weight, order it. And then usually when you do this, what you're looking for is something 1964 or before because it's some silver value and you can keep it or do what you want. That's your treasure. What we found is you would find 1, 2, possibly 3 pieces of silver when you went through 1,000 coins, okay? But there was this one box, and I've got video of it, and I'm so glad I recorded it, where he was like, "Oh, yeah, Kevin, look at this, and he started throwing these things out. And ultimately, what we ended up with, I mean, he was smiling so big by the end. It took about 45 minutes. We ended up with 52 pieces of silver, and one of those was an 1897 silver commemorative thing. When I looked that up, the last time something like that had happened, I looked up this coin magazine, was 2007, and there was an article about it. So my dad, when you saw that coin display, that coin is in there. And then, this was just really brought a lot of happiness to my dad. It was a connection point between he and I, him finding these pieces of treasure. And so I decided I wanted to give you guys one of what you have. If you picked up that little piece of silver there, that's the story behind it. It is a real silver dollar, and my dad found it and found a lot of joy in doing so. When I told my son, Holden, about my dad's passing, like us all, he cried, and he cried uncontrollably on my chest, and I held him. And that was very difficult, and it's supposed to be difficult, and I just said, it hurts because he loved us and we loved him so much. But when he could finally stop crying, the first thing he said is, he sat up and said, I just always loved to see him smile. And I never knew that my son felt that way. I knew I felt that way. I thought other people had to feel that way. But it was really touching to hear that. There are certain unbreakable laws of the universe. When it came to my dad, one of those laws is that if you knew him, then you loved to see him smile. And it would absolutely make your day if he let out one of his unrestrained belly laughs. He was a kind spirit. He was a gentle soul. He embodied innocence like no one I ever met. My son's name is Holden. The reason for that is from the book Catcher in the Rye. Holden Caulfield is the main character, this young man coming of age. And he rails, written in the 1950s by J.D. Salinger, and it was a very controversial book because it had curse words in it. But in the book, Holden Caulfield rails against the loss of innocence in childhood. And he calls it phony. We enter the phony adult world. That really resonated with me because I wanted to be real always, and I wanted my son to always be real and genuine. I wanted to feel his feelings and express them. And I think, I find myself often asking, why is anyone attracted to anything or enjoy doing anything? And there's a deep underlying reason if you search long enough. And it took some searching to realize, like, why did I value innocence? You know, why was that so important that I would name my son after that principle, the childlike innocence? And it was because my dad, this whole time, to have suffered some physical hardships and lots of mental and emotional struggle, and to still be, I mean, it says who he was, to still be this kind, gentle man. The dad was funny, and he was quirky, and we enjoyed that. I overheard my sister telling her best friend last night that our dad was crazy, funny, and quirky, and that my dad was where she and I both got that from, being a little different. I'd never thought of that, but she's exactly right. That's just one more gift that my dad gave to us. You can see just one example of that silliness out there in the foyer. There's a picture of where it was my dad's idea. He said, let's all dress up as Santa Claus. And then my mom took the picture. And so Cheryl, myself, and my dad's put a pillow in his belly to look like Santa Claus. That's another memory and one more beautiful gift from Dad. Over the last few years, personally, I especially enjoyed being not only my dad's son, but seeing our relationship grow into best friends. I love getting to know Dad, even deeper in our adult father-son relationship. And I'm not one who is innately built and equipped to care for people as tenderly as, for instance, in the nursing industry. I really admire that because I don't feel that. It's not there, but Dad brought that out in me. There were things, Brenda and Doris, just here locally, taking such good care of him all the time. But it became something that I loved to take care of him, to make his life easier and more enjoyable, to bring him happiness. I want to share a brief story about the spiritual side of Dad. This was just a couple months ago. We were going over this big 3-mile bridge in Jacksonville over the river. I remember going the incline. And I asked him, it was a story, what I have written here is a story about me asking about the person, who he was, and how, whether we die really, if the physical death is it, or we live on. I wanted to know what Dad thought. And he said, and I was telling him how, we're all in this together right now. We're on this journey, and I'm 44, but I remember all of you being 44, and I was kids in your homes. And how, I'm like, Dad, I see that, I look in the mirror, and it's changing here, but I feel like I'm the same person. And he cut me off, and he was like, yeah, he got excited. He said, I look in the mirror now, and I see a bald head, and I've got this gray, and I look so different. He's like, but in my mind, he said, I'm the same person. I'm 16 years old, And his animation caught me off guard. That's not my dad usually. So I said, Dad, to me, that is proof that the Spirit is there, and it goes on, and it's the same the whole time. We're changing here in the physical world. And I said, but to me, it just means that's proof we go on. We live on in a spiritual manner. And he just, if you've had conversations with my dad, sometimes they'll just kind of end and he won't say anything. And that's not uncommon. But in this instance, it struck me that he's on the right side of the truck over here, and he looks at me, and he's like, yeah. So he knew too, and he was comfortable. Dad was so thankful for his sisters, Doris and Brenda, who loved on him so much locally. He loved getting together with the whole family when they could all get together, but just locally, Doris and Brenda were closer, and so he really appreciated that. He may not have always loved the way Doris and Brenda loved him, but he loved them. He loved them dearly. We had talked a few times about Dad moving to Florida, but in my heart of hearts, I just knew that was never going to happen. I didn't know how it was going to play out because he loved them so much that he would not leave. He needed to be near the family, we lovingly call it. Right? That was where he would be until he passed. I think we all knew and lovingly and gladly accepted that home for my dad was never going to be far away from his sisters, Doris and Brenda, and his brothers, Robert, Steve, and Mitchell. Last night, I ran into Brenda. Brenda and Amy stopped by for a moment. And I'll just leave you with this, what Brenda said. She said, I always thought, she was walking out the door and we were talking about my dad's last moments and where he is now. And she said, I always thought if anybody is going to heaven, it was going to be that man. And I 100% agree. So I leave you with that. I thank you. He's with us now. He will always be with us.
Kevin, thank you for those beautiful words. And as I listened to you, I thought that he has given you and the whole family a wonderful inheritance, an invaluable inheritance, a priceless inheritance. And one part of that is his triumph over difficulty. His ability, however he was able to do it, to take in all the hardships he had experienced and to turn it into something beautiful and life-giving. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful gift for a father and son to be close in the way you described, particularly in the last stages of life. And I also heard that he gave you a gift of love of family, his cherishing of family and putting that at the center of his life. And so I feel you have and your whole family been deeply blessed by his life. And I'm grateful that that experience was yours. I wanted to see if there were any other family members or very close friends of Mr. Connor who would like to say a word at this time. If not, I'd like to invite us all into a moment of private reflection, prayer, and meditation. And as we are doing that for a few minutes, there will be some music in the background, but this is our time to collect our thoughts individually as we feel the need.
Dream your sweet dreams till your soul is released. Know you are loved. Rest in peace. Dream your sweet dreams till your soul is released. Beloved child, my heart is yours. Beloved child, go out and open doors with your love, with your faith, with your compassion, with your grace, oh, with your grace.
Life inevitably brings to us losses, suffering, difficulties, challenges, and we are all in need of understanding the ground that we can stand on and what we can rest upon securely. As we bring this gathering to a close, I'd like to share with you a reading from the Gospel of, Paul's letter to the Corinthians, first letter, who reminds us that the ultimate source of peace and security in the face of all life's difficulties is the love that we can experience between one another. The love that shows up as compassion, that shows up as empathy, and shows up as understanding. Paul writes, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I become as sounding brass. And even if I have the gift of prophecy and understands all mystery and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body as a sacrifice, but have not love, it doesn't profit me anything." Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy and is not puffed up. Love rejoices not in wrong acts, but rejoices in the truth. And love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Charity or love never fails. I thought as a child, but when I became a person, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am also known. And now abideth faith, hope, and love, these three. But the greatest of these is love. Could you please stand for our benediction? The family will be gathering at a graveside immediately after the end of this service in just a few moments. Could you join me in a word of prayer? O God of life and love and peace, we place into your keeping the eternal life of Mr. Connor. May we be strong in our faith that he rests with you in eternity, that he is at last safe and free from the hurt and injuries of life, and given unto life eternal. May we go in peace, may we be in peace as we leave this place. Amen.